Welcome to all the viewers and the listeners of the Suidlanders Media YouTube channel and that follows us on the other media outlets. Today is another Suidlanders chat with me, Marius Greyling, and obviously Simon Roche that is still in Russia. How's it going, Simon?
No, it's going well, thanks, Marius. I am fit, fat, and happy in Russia, doing a lot of walking as Russians walk unbelievable distances and eating well. The food is very good. I spent some time with a family yesterday. I'll tell more about them another time. But we were just talking about the availability of food in these teeny tiny little corner shops. And one of the family members blurted out, "Yeah, and there's so much more variety than in South Africa." And I said, "You see, the variety here is incredible. So lots of good food. I'm waiting for papers from the government, and then we'll see what we do next. Things are quiet. I haven't been doing terribly much except waiting for the government and doing interviews with you and a few other interviews. There's not all that much to report, quite honestly, Marius.
Okay. Yeah, well, Simon, I think over this past weekend, a lot has happened. So let's jump straight into it. And obviously, for the listeners or the viewers that don't know, the USA with Israel has bombed Iran. Sorry. Um, if I can just quote something from Scott Ritter and Judge Napolitano. They said the military actions of the USA against Iran was unlawful according to USA law, the United Nations law, and world law, which America was the main author of all these laws that was written into and signed by the countries. The bombing was useless and didn't accomplish anything as all valuable resources was moved from the bombing sites weeks ago. The strikes was planned and practiced already in Biden's administration already. So this is not just on Trump's footstep or door that they can hang this. It's already been planned years ago in the Biden administration. Simon, take it away for us.
Yeah, and Marius, the long and the short of it is that during last week, Donald Trump, following Israel's attack of Iran of 2 Fridays ago, call it 10 days back for the sake of a round number. During the course of last week, Donald Trump repeatedly said, well, Iran has got to go back to the negotiating table and there must be a ceasefire. Now, this is in spite of the fact that 2 Sundays ago, not yesterday, but the previous Sunday, again, call it 9 days inclusively for the sake of a round number, there were due to be negotiations between Iran and Israel with the USA as sort of a matchmaker, as a third party in the room in an old-fashioned matchmaking, boy meets girl, but there's a grandmother or an auntie present in the room for the first year. Maybe the Mormons still do it that way, or the Quakers or the Amish. So there's enormous contradiction and hypocrisy here. In any case, shortly after midnight on Sunday, the USA attacked Iran with 7 B-2A Boeing Spirit stealth bombers. And by now, everybody who's listening to this will have seen them, so I needn't give a description. They set off from Missouri in what turned out to be a 36-hour return flight. It was estimated differently, but it ended up being a 36-hour return flight, roughly speaking, 18 hours each way. Those bombers are supposedly the only bombers that can carry the mother of all bombs, the bunker buster, the 30,000 pounds. I beg your pardon, let me just briefly inform the listeners. For those who don't know, the internet is choked in Russia from time to time for security reasons. You can get the best internet you've ever had in your whole life here in Moscow, but it can also be interrupted, and sometimes a phone's data works terrifically well, but the Wi-Fi in many places is unusually poor. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it applies only when you're using a VPN, and sometimes it doesn't apply. The VPN makes no difference. This afternoon, unlike this morning, I'm struggling with all manner of internet, and so I'm sitting outside the hotel that I've been staying in, which is the Crocus Hotel. For those who may care to look it up, the Crocus Hotel in Tushino, or Tushino, as we would write it in English, outside Moscow, one of the further suburbs, about 18 kilometers from the heart of Moscow, in order to get some half-decent internet. So please excuse the background noise. Hopefully it won't be distracting. These B-2 Spirit bombers are supposedly the only ones that can carry these 30,000-pound bombs. And I'm just, this is mental arithmetic. That's about 14,000 kilograms, metric kilograms. And they can apparently carry 2 each. So 7 bombers, 14 of the biggest conventional bombs in the world, as far as I know. They were apparently accompanied by a few fighters, although the reports of the numbers of fighters are very, very sketchy. But we did get some infographics from the USA authorities, from the military, showing the route of the bombers, and in the infographic, in the little picture, there were fighters accompanying them as escorts. Those bombers proceeded to drop 12 bombs, these enormous bombs, on one particular Iranian nuclear facility, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a minute or two, and 2 on another facility, and a submarine or submarines in the northern Indian Ocean fired 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles at 2 of the 3 installations. So 3 were attacked, one of them overwhelmingly with 12 of these enormous 14-ton bunker buster bombs, another with just 2 bunker buster bombs and some cruise missiles, and then a third one just with Tomahawk cruise missiles. Before we go any further, I should point out to listeners something that they probably haven't heard before. There are altogether 33 installations that contribute to Iran's civilian nuclear program. We've previously discussed the fact that 16 US intelligence agencies signed a document stating that there was no evidence that Iran, recently, by the way, very recently, and Tulsi Gabbard, the director of intelligence, of national intelligence, in other words, the head of all of the various intelligence agencies, the 16 of them, spoke about this a couple of months ago. Iran does not have a non-civilian, in other words, a weapons-oriented, a military nuclear program. So back to the point, if we talk about 3 facilities attacked, that's 3 of 33. There are 33 various facilities registered with the International Atomic Energy Agency and registered under the auspices of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the famous NPT or NNPT, as some people write it, Nuclear non-proliferation treaty.
Hmm.
Some of those 33 facilities provide services that you might not think of unless you're a nuclear scientist. For instance, one produces a substance called molybdenum, which is an element in the periodic table that has to be used in the creation of nuclear power. So it's very important, absolutely vital. It's not as if it's a ball bearing factory that's also producing ball bearings for trucks or machines or something. It is a dedicated, vitally important, major player in the constellation, like a constellation of stars in this kind of a solar system or a constellation of planets, let's say, a planetary system in the solar system of Iran's nuclear endeavors, 33 of which 3 were attacked. Iran is saying that no meaningful damage was done. There's nothing that was harmed that cannot be immediately repaired. So there was no significant damage done, even where there was damage done. And nothing was damaged, which is vital and crucial. And it's going to take 3 days to repair it. Therefore, for 3 days, we're not going to be able to do anything. We are not sure, but it seems as if whatever damage was done more to entranceways and entrance tunnels and blast doors and that sort of thing. You, Marius, may have picked up better information than I'm giving right at this minute, but so far through all of the reports that I've combed, I've not seen anything to suggest, apart from Israeli and American claims, but those are just claims. Yeah. And we're at the point now where it's not controversial to say that they lie about everything all of the time. Maybe they're lying for good, maybe they're lying for God, and the lies are therefore not bad, but the fact remains that they lie about everything all of the time. So let's leave claims aside and focus more upon specialists' opinions, specialists' analyses of satellite footage, and so on. So very little damage to these three institutions, and I think that gives a good background and introduction to the subject. Marius, I don't know if you've got more comments. I've got pages and pages and pages of notes here, but perhaps you've got something.
No, just to add to what you said about let's not just believe the mainstream media. Colonel Douglas McGregor, I know you follow him also. He also said, listen here, this was basically bombing empty buildings. It's a political fluff piece to say that they've done so much damage and they have done this and this and this. When if he was still part of the military and he had the final call to go ahead with the strike, he would never have allowed it. And if he did allow it, he will never proclaim to the public that it was a huge success. According to him, it is a political stunt, and it's definitely not a successful military operation that has been succeeded in what they wanted to do. So yeah, according to like I said, Colonel Douglas McGregor, he said it was futile, it was stupid, it was and it didn't do what the American mainstream media claimed it did do.
Yes, Marius, I think that it's very much a provocation, and we needn't get into the weeds of conspiracy theory as some people deem it to be right now. We can touch on that on another occasion, but you and I have spoken at length about how the events of the past few years, going back to prior to the invasion of Ukraine, that is to say, the events instigated by the USA / NATO / the European Union / Israel, cannot be understood in simple terms. You really have to scratch for motives. And you and I have spoken about the significance of this year, etc., etc., etc. And as I say, we needn't get into it right now. But I will point this out, that the operation was conducted in the wee hours of the anniversary of the German invasion of Russia, or of the Soviet Union, on the 22nd of June, 1941. And as some observers have pointed out, that's no coincidence. You know, at the lower levels, Marius, you and I might say, yeah, well, you never know. Maybe they couldn't, and maybe they didn't, and maybe somebody forgot to mention. But when you have a room full of the brightest minds in the whole world, people who have a minimum of 3 degrees from Harvard, if not 4 or 5, then there is no question that it was known. In the sort of ignorant lower levels of life that you and I occupy, we might doubt these things and not be sure. But when you consider that you've got a room full of people who are all certifiably a genius or close to it, then there's simply no question. So again, I think that we can safely say that there was perhaps an antagonistic message towards Russia, given the date that they chose. They could have chosen any date. Why choose a date that is particularly painful to a very close ally of Iran? And I'll leave it there for a second. I can continue on another subject if you like, unless you would like to throw something in.
No. Yeah, you can go ahead, Simon.
Okay, so carrying on from that, I'll point out to you that Russia has, for some time, been endeavoring to attract Iran to sign a mutual defense pact. Now, naturally, given the sizes of the two countries, their levels of relative progress, their economic power, their military power, what that amounted to was, let me be your big brother. There's very little defense or security that Iran can offer Russia. But the Iranis have repeatedly and quite explicitly, they haven't beaten around the bush, said, we have declined Russia's offer because we are dead set on taking care of our own problems and on developing greater and greater self-reliance for Iran, for Iran's progress, for Iran's future. Right now, we don't want to be dependent upon anybody for anything. And of course, they've done quite well in that regard, in spite of the tremendous sanctions that have been imposed upon them over the past decade by the USA and the USA's allies. Iran has managed to, among other things, developed arguably the most, perhaps sophisticated is not the ideal word, but the most recognized drone industry in the world. You've got Iran, the USA, Russia, Turkey has a very advanced and well-developed drone industry. The Israelis obviously have, but Iran has probably been, outside of the Ukraine war anyway, the country that has consistently been at the forefront of drone development in the absence of a good fighter aircraft fleet. In other words, they said, we've got F-5 and F-14 Grumman Tomcats, 40-odd years old, 50 years old. We can't procure new planes from the USA. The USA will have a fit if we attempt to procure planes, from Russia. Let's sleeping dogs lie and look past the airplane solution and focus on the drone solution. So that is their mentality. So that reply saying, look, we didn't want to get into bed with Russia because that's at the moment not the way that we're going about doing things for Iran. That is quite plausible in light of their track record. Perhaps I should mention something that I'm sure most people won't be aware of. During the Cold War, many countries developed very good nuclear bunker solutions. If a nuclear war was imminent, governments, administrators, bureaucrats, the high and mighty would be able to dash down into enormous bunker complexes that would be able to sustain them for months, if not years, if not decades. After the Cold War ended in, call it for the sake of a number, the 25th of December, Christmas Day 1991, when the Soviet Union, when Russia actually retired from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was made up of 15 modern countries, namely Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, which are now the 5 famous Central Asian republics, the 5 famous stans of Central Asia. Also Moldova, Ukraine, Belarus, that gives us 8. Also Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, not 8, I've messed up the count there, but Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and the 15th was Russia. And on the 25th of December 1991, only Russia and Kazakhstan remained in the Soviet Union. And when Russia said, we're leaving, Kazakhstan for a few days was the sole member of the Soviet Union. So when it dissolved, that was the end of the Cold War, the focus on things like nuclear bunkers was lost. We've seen in recent years a tremendous resurgence, especially among Western oligarchs. The bunker building industry in the West has become something quite phenomenal. Anybody who doesn't know about this, but who's interested in it, would do well to search on YouTube, Canadian prepper, nuclear bunker building. He has had a number of episodes on that subject, including at least 2 that I know of, interviews with one of the world's leading bunker builders. And call it, again, for the sake of a round number, a half a decade, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I began reporting on this quite extensively from time to time, that there appeared to be some sort of a secret foreknowledge among Western oligarchs of impending doom. Because all of a sudden, all of these guys started having bunkers built for themselves.
Yeah.
Whether it was Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, or you name it, in all sorts of strange locations. And of course, it could have just been paranoia on my part. But of course, now we look at it and we say, somebody knew something.
Yeah.
Very much like the exodus of CEOs from Fortune 500 companies and NASDAQ and S&P listed companies in 2019. In 2019, immediately prior to the pandemic, there was an exodus, a resignation of CEOs from these companies as had never, ever been seen, even remotely, 4 times higher than the next closest year of the same company's CEOs resigning. And interestingly, a few years younger, something like 3 years younger on average than the previous average age of CEOs retiring in a given year. And of course, a year or 9 months after that, people were saying somebody knew something. Now, in that vein, we are reading that the Chinese, for instance, are building or completing the building of an enormous nuclear bunker city that was begun under Mao Zedong I forget the exact date, but about 50 years ago, give or take, plus or minus. When Mao passed away, his heir, Deng Xiaoping, abandoned the project. It has recently become restarted. And I'm told by some very clever people in the USA, incidentally, one of them is the autistic genius, the autistic savant at Harvard University, who informed Suidlanders in 2019 that the pandemic was a fiction, but whatever it was based on was going to turn out to have come out of the Wuhan P4 laboratory, China's only P4 laboratory in Wuhan. And lo and behold, every word that he told us transpired to be true. He's now telling us that the Chinese nuclear bunker building project, if it was its own military, its cost would be the fourth largest military budget in the world after the USA, China, and Russia. If that was taken out of the Chinese military budget, if it is indeed part of the military budget, for all I know, it might be being done under the auspices of the Department of Housing or who knows what in China. But if it was a standalone military budget, it would be the fourth largest in the world. We're also hearing of other projects around the world, very, very vaguely so far, that were begun previously and not completed, or which were planned and never undertaken, now being furiously undertaken. So I'm going to end this long soliloquy there, Marius, on that note of, it seems as if somebody is afraid, or perhaps better put, confident, that we are at this moment, with this crisis of the USA attacking 100% falsely Iran, that we are perhaps facing some sort of heightened crisis. I don't want to say it's definitely World War III. I know because a little birdie told me, but certainly if it continues in this vein where nuclear powers continue to attack nuclear powers, as excuse me, as we've seen NATO do against Russia for the past 3 years solid, and as we're seeing the USA and Israel and Iran do to one another, well, it possesses every kind of potential, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes, Simon, I agree completely. My last tidbit and thought that the viewers can maybe think about, we can maybe speak about it in another video when we do another one, is that Iran specifically threatened the USA with their sleeper cells. And then on the USA media, they said, well, how did sleeper cells come in? But it looks like everybody forgot that under Biden, the borders was open, just like the borders are open in a lot of the other first world countries, and they got in a lot of immigrants from all over the world, and now they might reap the, well, I won't say the benefits, the what do you call it? They might reap, yeah, but they
The consequences.
the consequences of that open border policies of the first world countries. But yeah, like I said, Simon, we might discuss it a bit later in another video. Thanks once again for having a chat with me, and I think we're going to do a couple of videos, well, quite a lot of videos in this week as things are unfolding. So stay tuned, listeners, viewers, for more updates from me and Simon in our Suidlanders chat program. Thanks for chatting, Simon.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure, Marius. See you soon.
Yeah.
Very soon, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okie dokes.
Yes.
Cheerio then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.